Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. This is Cold War 2.0, episode number 29. Tonight, as usual, we're joined by our dear friend, Dr. Tarik Cyril Amar, to discuss the latest turning points in the ongoing global contest between East and West, a contest that is no longer theoretical, but visible across trade routes, tech factories, and naval deployments. Our first topic is going to be China's quiet victory in the trade war. According to The Economist, China is not merely surviving Western sanctions and tariffs, it is outmaneuvering them. While Washington tries to decouple, Beijing is expanding exports, controlling supply chains, and redefining the global economy on its own terms. Meanwhile, Europe finds itself trapped in this crossfire, most recently in the Nexperia crisis, where a dispute between China and the Netherlands over semiconductor control is now threatening production for Volvo, one of my favorite cars, Volkswagen, and Japanese suppliers. It's a glimpse into the chaos that follows when politics collides with globalization. In another diplomatic blow, Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul has abruptly cancelled his trip to China because, as reports suggest, no one in Beijing wanted to meet him. And finally, even as Trump flexes power in the Pacific, he is delaying his expected meeting with Putin in Hungary, saying he doesn't want a wasted meeting. So tonight we will ask, is China now dictating the terms of global economy? Has Europe lost its diplomatic relevance? And is the US overextending itself militarily, economically, and politically in this new multipolar Cold War? Dr. Tarik Cyril Amar, welcome again to Syriana Analysis. And I hope that today we will really dig into these complex issues and we will add sense to it and probably also draw some smiles as the people are coming back and say, we're presenting them brilliant analysis and they are enjoying it because we're bringing them also with some sense of humor.
Hi, Kevork. Glad to be back.
Today you sent me an article, Tarik, from The Economist, why China is winning the trade war. And I wanted to get some snaps from this article just to make sense of it. So we have three major points in this article. The first one is China is rewriting the global trade routes. The article says China is trying to develop and enforce a new set of global trading norms on the ruins of the old liberal order. The second point is China's strength is bolstered, not weakened, by this trade war. The article says the final reason why China is winning is that the trade war has made Mr. Xi and the Communist Party stronger, not weaker. And finally, the third point is America's allies are reluctant to join fight against China. The article I'm quoting now, America's allies have little interest in joining our trade war. The European Commission said it has no intention of decoupling from China. So I think the question here should be, given these points that I mentioned, China's ability to rewrite trade norms, its internal political fortifications under the trade war, and the reluctance of the US allies to fully join in, does the US still have the capacity, let's say, to lead in global trade diplomacy, or has the role already shifted decisively in Beijing's interest?
Look, I think what a lot of people probably were thinking when they saw that Economist article, and that article is the shorter one of two, right? There's a companion piece that I didn't want to bother you with, which is very, very long. So they dedicated a big deal, really the main part of this particular issue of The Economist, to making that case that China is now winning the trade war. And like other people, the first thing I thought was, well, if The Economist is saying it, it's probably true. Because you have to compare this a little bit to those who remember the Soviet Union and its newspapers like Pravda, right? The truth. Pravda was the famous one. So if one day Pravda comes out and writes that, by the way, the US is winning the Cold War, you know it's true because Pravda has no interest in admitting it. And The Economist is basically the Pravda of the West. That's what The Economist is. It's a very belligerent neoliberal outlet. It's extremely Atlanticist. It's extremely pro-American, even if it's originally British and still British. So The Economist saying this is really quite something. It means things must have developed very far, and they have. Now, back to your question. Does it mean that China has, so to speak, already won it? No, I don't think so. I don't think, to be fair to the authors of that article, I don't think that's what they're saying. And I don't think it's true either. I think the situation that they're describing is even more interesting and even more challenging for all of us, including the United States, which is that China is now strong enough not only to defend against aggressive trade war, tariff war measures, sanction measures, you name it, from the United States, but to strike back very, very effectively. And the argument that they're making in this article is that these return strikes, these retaliations by China, are actually now more efficient, more powerful, and more painful to the US than what the US is doing to China. That's what they're really saying here. So it's not that they're saying the battle has been won by either side, but they are saying it's going one way, and that's China's. And that's, of course, sensational, because we all come out of a world in which, especially in the area of trade and currency and finance and so on, the US usually always has its way, right? And you tell it. I mean, what you played at the beginning, this clip from Trump, one of the things he says there is, look, what a good deal we did with the Europeans. That means with the EU, right? Now, here's the point, and he obviously can't quite grasp it. The EU is an association of American client regimes. That's what it really is, right? And this is the polite way. The harsh way, and I think the more realistic way now, is to say, like Yanis Varoufakis, like other smart observers, the EU is actually an association of American vassal states. It's even worse. They're ultra-dependent. And so he got the EU to sign up to this insane non-deal, right, that he offered them, which is basically, I get everything, you get absolutely nothing, right?
Yep.
And he thinks of that as an example for what should be done with China.
Yes.
And the point is, China is not at all like the EU. China is a serious geopolitical opponent and fully sovereign. It's not a vassal of the United States. Least thing they would ever think about, right? So he doesn't understand the difference, it seems. I'm sure that some people around him do understand the difference.
What's the proper way of dealing with China? If you're a US president or you're a US official, what approach should the US pursue with China in this new reality that China has imposed? I think the bus has already passed the station. Like there is no way for the wheel to turn, the time to go back. Yeah.
Yes. They cannot get, the US cannot get to a point where it can dictate. Because that's what they did to the EU, right? And Turnberry and Scotland. That's exactly what they did. They dictated the outcome. That was not a real agreement. That was a diktat, technically speaking. And with China, there's no such option. Even if the US went through a very costly, very intense trade war against China, in the end, they could still not do it. They would never win it, right? So if they understand that, then the obvious thing that they have to now do is settle for a negotiated outcome, which is normal, actually. With normal people, non-Americans, understand this immediately. For Americans, the idea that you actually have to give and take, that it's reciprocal, is very hard to grasp. But now I understand. They only take, right? But they have to understand that with China, it's going to be give and take or nothing, or war, and they're going to all suffer terribly. So that's what they need to do. And to be a bit more specific, right, there is, of course, the double issue here. They're overlapping. They're not exactly the same, although they're often mixed up, of critical minerals and rare earth. Right? Technically speaking, the rare earths are a subset of the critical minerals. And when you look at the whole situation, China is incredibly capable of damaging the United States and really the whole West through its enormously powerful hold specifically on rare earths, which go into certain magnets and other applications. But it also actually has a lot of leverage with quite a few critical minerals beyond rare earths, right? Moreover, there are issues like lithium-ion batteries. They're bringing them into play now. There is the fact that China actually supplies much more production inputs to American industry than American industry supplies to China. So if China turns the tap off, these American factories can't work anymore. Talk about, bringing manufacturing back to America. You can't do it without China helping you. That's the reality. Yes. So you can go through this and through this and through this. There isn't really anything that the United States still holds where it could say this is so powerful, China must submit. If anything, it's the other way around, as sensational as this may be for us. But what China has done over the last, it really started under Deng Xiaoping, right? It's that long ago. Deng Xiaoping, the leader who really started the economic reforms of China, right, in the 70s, is the same one who I think in the 90s, but I might not be.
I think we have a technical problem with Tarik, but before he joins us back, as our friend Sevak is kindly asking you guys, please like this video. It's free. We are hundreds of people watching it, and 10% show generosity in liking these streams. I would just try to kick Tarik probably out of the studio, and then he will definitely try to join it back via the link which I sent him. And as we're speaking about, I know we lost Tarik, but he will come back for sure. It's just a technical issue. I'm sure about it. But he was also mentioning the trade war and the EU in this case. And I want to bring, he's back. He's back. Tarik is back.
Kevork, I don't know what's going on. It's my side.
Somebody was very angry at you for dropping truth bombs. So
enough already. So anyhow, let's in terms of here's what I was going to say, that Deng Xiaoping already made that famous statement. It's really, he said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. This is how long they've been thinking about this. And especially recently, they have been very systematically doing two things. They've been building up their own potential leverage, especially in this area, but in others as well. And they have systematically analyzed their own weak spots. In 2002, for instance, there was basically an exercise with the House Journal of the Chinese Ministry of, I think they call it Science and Technology, one of those. And usually that's a state journal, nothing special. And in 2002, they ran this, 7 years ago. 7 years ago, they ran this special series, 35 articles, and they were all dedicated to one theme. What are our choke points? In other words, what are our weaknesses? Literally. So they invited people to write about what are the weak spots of our Chinese economy where we could be de facto attacked by a foreign power that's malevolent. And since then, and even before that, of course, that was just one phenomenon, right? But it's clear that the Chinese have run a very deliberate, well thought out strategy of preparing themselves for what the United States has been trying to do to them. And that's, again, completely different from the Europeans. The Europeans have nothing like that, neither at the national level, say France, Germany, UK, whatever, nor at the EU level. It just doesn't exist, right?
No. Tarik, as you were mentioning the European Union, I was reading an article, it's a post basically today about the EU and the self-own of the EU. So as we may know that the Netherlands expropriated the microchip manufacturer Nexperia from Chinese investors, microchip production stopped. On Sunday, the Dutch government, by nationalizing the Chinese company, claimed to guarantee the European Union access to Nexperia chips, but something went wrong. China simply blocked component supplies and production stopped. And yet this company is a key supplier of chips used in the European Union's automotive industry. This is like another own goal by Ursula von der Leyen, which is very, very effective, apparently. And unfortunately for many other companies, and one of them is, I have a lots of sympathy for Volvo, and you know that Volvo and Volkswagen warn Nexperia battle risks, triggering factory shutdowns. So Volvo Cars and Volkswagen have warned that there may be temporary plant shutdowns in Europe as a result of supply chain disruptions caused by a battle between China and the Netherlands over control of chip maker Nexperia. The standoff between Nexperia China and the global company has continued, with the China unit this week telling local staff they could ignore instructions from Dutch headquarters. Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao on Tuesday urged the Dutch economic minister to resolve the issue promptly and properly, calling for Wingtech's interests and contract to be upheld. Wang is set to travel to Brussels in coming days to discuss the Nexperia standoff and rare earth control with European officials. I think it's fair here to ask Tarik, the Nexperia crisis seems to symbolize the death of globalization as we knew it. Multinational corporations now split by national loyalties, and allies trade into warfare. Does this mark the beginning of a new era where even Europe becomes a battlefield and a battleground between American and Chinese industrial interests? And how might this reshape the West's ability to sustain its technological dominance?
Let me say one thing first, if I may use a comparison, right? I often play chess against a chess app on my phone. And when I'm going to make, or when I'm making a particular dumb move, the chess app it's a very polite app. It doesn't say you're stupid. It says, when you make a move, maybe consider first how your opponent would react to it, right? And so I feel I want to send that app to Ursula von der Leyen and all these geniuses and Karremans in the Netherlands, the economy minister who's behind it. Because how much preparation does it take to think through the consequences of taking this aggressive step of basically stealing, legalized stealing of Nexperia from the Chinese? If you want to do this, why don't you for one moment sit down and think, let's imagine I'm the Chinese owner. What am I going to do next? Right? And then you would see, hey, maybe I'm not going to supply the factories anymore.
Yes.
Right? Apparently, that's too much. That's too much. They can't do this. Now, obviously, the other thing here is that this comes from the USA. I guarantee you this. This is part of US trade strategy. And as Europeans usually do, those Europeans, those EU, NATO Europeans, they execute American orders, no matter what happens to themselves. They're basically ready for kamikaze for the US. And that's what they're doing, right? So back to your question, is this a milestone on the way out of globalization, deglobalization? Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't go so far and say it's the beginning, because I think it started even earlier, but it's definitely a major milestone, and people will probably give it a little bit of attention in future history books about this particular phenomenon, how that worked. There is a detail here that a lot of people don't even pay attention to, and I like to point out, which is, as far as I know, the way that the Dutch authorities finagled this, how they did this formally to make it appear legal, right? They got some of the Dutch staff, the Dutch managers in the Netherlands of this company to ask the Dutch government for help. Okay, you see what's happening here, right?
Wow.
I'm a Chinese company. I have a dependence in the Netherlands, and I'm nice. I hire Dutch people. I hire Dutch managers, right? And then those Dutch managers work as Trojan horses, quite literally. They are being used to create the pretext to take my company away from me. So what am I going to do in the future about hiring these people who are not Chinese? What do you think I'm going to do? And what are my friends going to do who have watched this? Brilliant strategy, Europe. Go for it.
Go for it.
Anyhow, So anyhow, yeah, this is definitely an extremely bad sign if you are a fan of globalization, which I'm not. So, I'm not going to cry. But the other thing, of course, is your second point is Europe going to be turned into sort of battlefield between the US and the Chinese? Yes. And it shouldn't. It shouldn't. There's a fairly smart guy in German industry, right? You know me. It's not easy for me to say something nice about a capitalist, but I will, right? And his name is what's his name again? Martin Brudermüller. Brudermüller. He used to be the CEO of Siemens, not Siemens. I'm sorry, BASF. BASF, biggest chemical company in the world still. Still the biggest single company in the world, chemical industry. Used to be the CEO a year ago, so he went off to Mercedes-Benz, where he's now. So what about Brudermüller? Brudermüller has always been very outspoken. He's quite an honest guy. He's a chemist by training, not a business person by training, which probably plays a role.
I think
he said this in interviews, has always been, we have to, in Europe, work well with both the US and China to construct ourselves as somehow in between and having to follow either one or the other or make ourselves into a battleground is a mistake. I'm extrapolating, but he basically said, we have to find a way of working with the US and China. That's the world we live in. That's the world as it will be. And you know what his signature achievement was when he was the CEO of BASF? The biggest single production unit of BASF is still in Germany. It's in Ludwigshafen. It's their traditional core. It emerged in the 19th century. The biggest. It's the biggest such facility in the world still, although it's declining. And this unit and all other German units, BASF units in Germany, don't make any profits anymore. They make losses for years. BASF is doing well because they're in 80 countries, right? Not just in Germany. And you know what they've done with China? They've built a modernized copy, just better, of course, of Ludwigshafen in Zhanjiang in China, right? And that is coming online now. That was Brudermüller's decision, and he was absolutely right? But nobody else, apparently, in German industry, or certainly not in German and EU politics, is capable of that sort of strategic thought. It's just not there. Don't ask me why.
Is it about the like the competence of these politicians, or because they are not free to like maneuver?
Both. I think it's both by now, because look, I really believe in elite capture by now. I think it's a very real thing, and I think European elites have to a large extent been captured by the US in various ways. Not all of them necessarily formally criminal.
And the US is captured by who?
Well, you're not supposed to ask. That one is everybody who wants to know knows. Anyhow, so we have elite capture problems. To me, that's the only explanation. When I look at the way that people like Mark Rutte, Kaja Kallas, Ursula von der Leyen,
the Game of Thrones woman,
how these cadres operate, or Merz, actually Merz as well, I see them so incredibly subservient to US interests that I must talk of elite capture. And once again, I'm not saying they're literally traitors. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that their behavior is such that they do not serve either the national interests of their countries anymore, nor the interests of the EU as a whole, which is very hard to define anyhow. I think we have elite capture in Europe. And the other thing that I think is also true is what you said. They're not competent. I don't think they are. Ursula von der Leyen, I don't think, is a smart woman. Basically, she isn't smart. Apart from the fact that every single political job she has held in her life, she has messed up. Let's not forget the reason why she was shifted away from German politics to the EU, nobody remembers this, is that she was a scandalous failure as German defense minister. That's how this whole mess started. And in these old days, what everybody used to do, and partly they still do it, when you have a total dud in your national politics, but you can't just drop them because they have powerful followers, there's a faction in your party that wouldn't forgive you, you send them off to Brussels and to the EU. That's exactly how Ursula von der Leyen originally got her job. She got it literally for being incompetent. Let's not even talk about somebody like Callas, who is even more obviously completely in the wrong place. So yes, there is a competence problem. I really think so. I mean, think about it like this, and I think Europeans usually don't know this because our news don't show that aspect of other countries. Yes. But if you follow Russian news, as I do, for instance, you can think about Russian politics, whatever you want. You can hate them if you want. I don't. But if you want, go ahead, hate them. But you will have to admit one thing. A lot of it is done by very competent people, really competent people. If you do the same for China, it's much harder for me to tell because I know Russian, I don't know Chinese. Okay, fine. But as far as I can see, it's a system full of competent cadres. They also have a lot of problems, I know, but there is a core, a big core of people who know what they're doing, often with a very strong bent towards natural sciences and engineering, right? Whole books have been written about the fact that China is run by engineers and the US is run by lawyers, and there's something to that, right? But the basic fact is the competence. And yes, there are differences. You can run countries competent or not competent, as in enterprises, as in companies, right? And it has consequences, obviously. And we have had a string in Europe, and I'm sure there are deep structural issues that I don't yet understand, but we have had a string. I think empirically this is true, of a massive loss of government, administrative, strategic competence. That's a real thing.
The other day, Tarik, I watched a video of Kaja Kallas. I'm not going to play it now again. But I watch her videos almost every day on X because she keeps posting them, and I wanna.
That's rough.
Yeah, it's really rough. Unfortunately, that I have to listen what she says. And you know what also caught my attention, and this is something that I haven't really noticed previously, and that is how poor her vocabulary is. Like the way she structures the sentences, it clearly shows that she. Her knowledge level is probably 12-year-old, 15-year-old maximum vocabulary.
It's terrible. No, look here.
But it's not only about the language, by the way. It's about how she is structuring the sentences that don't make sense together. You know?
Yeah. Let me put it like this. Okay, English isn't her first language, right? And I sometimes don't find a word, and I certainly have an accent, and so on. I understand. But what I find striking about her is that her English stagnates at an extremely primitive level. It clearly she isn't capable of developing a halfway adequate, a halfway sophisticated version of English, and that should be possible for her. And that, by the way, is very similar to Annalena Baerbock, where you could also see that. No, really, except as our viewers maybe know, I'm a native speaker of German, and I can tell you, I've said it often before, Annalena Baerbock never had proper German. And I mean this literally. I'm not just making a joke. Annalena Baerbock cannot speak proper German. And I'm not being pedantic. Basic proper German. It's full of weird mistakes, her German. And that's her first language. And from this atrociously mangled German, she constantly sort of tries to translate into what she thinks is English. And the outcome is tragic. And look, I understand people have different minds. I totally understand that. There are people who are way, by multiples, better at maths than I am. Yeah, I'm mediocre. That's the best I can say about me. But there is still something to the fact that when somebody cannot learn English at all, although it's really part of their career and their job, it does tell you something. It does tell you something.
And why is she speaking in English to begin with? Because she wants to deliver the message to English-speaking people. And if she's unable to do that in an eloquent manner, in my opinion, the language is the first indication to your like the way you speak, the way you express your opinions, it shows your intellectual capacity as well, whether it's in English or German or any other language. The way, if you're coherent, if you're able to deliver your message, if you're convincing, those are all important things in a political field that I don't find them And then I find these people in positions of power, and that is a little bit troubling in my opinion. I just want to respond to a friend. He says, correction to our video title today. He says, are China and Russia winning America's war against them? And you're correct, by the way. I will change the title of the video when this stream is over, because the title I typed is, are China and Russia winning their wars against America? But this is America's war against them. That's correct, actually. I will change that after the stream.
Good point.
Yeah. Criticism accepted. By the way, my friends, the German Foreign Minister, Herr Johann Wadephul, my heart already started beating a little bit harder now. He wanted to go to China. Unfortunately, the Chinese are treating the German foreign ministers really horribly. Nobody wants to meet Wadephul in China. So the foreign minister, Johann Wadephul, from the CDU, actually wanted to fly to China on Sunday, but now the trip was spontaneously canceled. The reason, apparently, no one in China wants to meet the German minister. Tarik, the Chinese apparently having some beef with German diplomats. They have been doing this, it seems, consistently with Annalena Baerbock and now with Wadephul. Like, it really looks like they haven't done this to other foreign ministers, but to the German Annalena Baerbock and now Wadephul, like not sending a delegation or a high-ranking delegation to the airport, and the way they treat them when they arrive. And I know that they're upset at Germany, but it looks like they have some special treatment for German diplomats.
Look, I think you're right on the whole. I think there is a special treatment for German diplomats, and it's not good. And it's deserved, I will say. I'm sorry, but it's deserved. But I can think of one exception. It's actually an interesting exception, spontaneously. And that is the former American foreign minister, Secretary of State, I should say, Tony Blinken. And not always, but there was a moment when Blinken traveled to China and tried to lecture them again. And the Chinese leaked a small video, apparently shot maybe even with a telephone, I don't know, where you see Xi Jinping and his people waiting in some room for Blinken to come in. And Xi Jinping can be heard. It's very clear in Chinese, had to be translated for people like me, but he can be heard saying something along the lines of, and what about this one? When is he gonna leave finally? Right? And I was very clear. They were sending a message there too. But on the whole, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think the Germans have had particularly bruising encounters recently. I would say two things about it. One is that they have been asking for it because they have shown no respect. I mean, basic respect. I don't mean submissiveness, the healthy respect for their Chinese partners. Annalena Baerbock had a habit of going there, essentially lecturing them in their own country, in front of the cameras, right? Basically explaining the world to them, telling them what to do, right? Just weird. Wadephul has not been better from afar. He has not been better. He's shown no respect at all. And the Chinese are paying them back. It's actually tit for tat. It's a deterrent strategy. They're showing them, if you want to have normal contact with us, you have to learn to behave. And I don't know if they can, to be honest. But there is a second level here. There's a second level that makes me, as a German, particularly sad. Really, I'm telling you, it makes me really genuinely sad.
Even you feel nationalistic feelings.
No, recently it's getting worse. It's getting worse, you know. With the polls turn me into a real nationalist. But anyhow, so no, but what it is that, look, you look at the way Chinese officials treat German officials, and you can say, there is a lack of respect. But then you have to ask, do German officials respect Germany? No. Berlin doesn't respect Germany. Our own government doesn't respect our country. It doesn't respect our country. Our country's interests are always the last that count. And one can argue between left-wing Germans like me and right-wing Germans and those in the middle. We can argue about what those interests are, right? And we may come up with very different results. But whatever you think those interests are, what our governments are doing now under Scholz and under Merz it cannot be in pursuit of these interests at all. It just doesn't make sense. And the most brutal case, of course, is Nord Stream, right? The Poles, I'm sorry, let's be honest here. They have basically admitted that they helped the Ukrainians blow up a vital piece of infrastructure, Nord Stream. They have basically admitted it. And not only have they admitted it, they've been spitting in our faces. And they haven't done this for the first time. They've come out, their most important politicians, Prime Minister Donald Tusk, Foreign Minister Sikorsky, they come out, Radoslav, they basically say, you know what? Yes, we give a fuck what you think. And actually, you Germans have to apologize to us that you dared build a pipeline. This is literally the Polish position. What the Poles have done now, when they let this guy go, was completely legal. Even if it was done by a judge, it was against the EU laws on this sort of thing, which are actually laid down in a cluster of rules around something called the EU Haftbefehl. So the way you can arrest somebody across EU borders. It's insane what has happened. But there, again, two levels. The Poles do this, that's insane enough, to a fellow NATO member, to a fellow EU member, to a neighbor, to a country that massively pays into the EU, whereas they massively take. Yes, that counts as well. And what's the reaction from Berlin? Crickets. Absolutely nothing. So our people, our leaders don't respect our country. That's where we are in Germany. So how do they expect to be respected by the Chinese? Because one thing they should understand, and this is true even of Trump, whom I can't stand. Trump, in his weird nationalist way, does think America first. It's not the America I want. It's terrible America. But the perversion of treating your own country as if you're not responsible for it. The Chinese as well, they can't grasp it. No. The Chinese leadership, the one thing they all have in common is they feel responsible for their country, as they should. They don't know who they're dealing with when they're looking at us.
Tarik, if I want to play the devil's advocate here on the side of Poland, they are arguing and saying that this infrastructure has been fueling the war machine of Russia. But isn't this a German-Russian infrastructure? Or
doesn't work. Here's the complexity, but it's not that complex. It's a pretext, and I can tell you exactly why. The pipelines belonged to a large extent to Germany. So the Poles have now basically done the following. Let's go back a little bit and let's remember one thing. For years, the Ukrainians and everybody else were lying into our faces. They were positively saying, we didn't do it. How dare you? We didn't do it. And then recently they shifted their position. They've shifted the goalposts in a very sneaky way. Now they're saying, oh, well, and if we did it, then it was a legitimate act of war. So if you thought from the beginning it was a legitimate act of war, why were you lying to us all the time? Question number one. Second point about this idea that it's a legitimate act of war. You cannot destroy a third party's pipelines claiming you're carrying out a legitimate act of war against your opponent, which is Russia. We actually are Germany. We are not Russia. So let me put it like this, right? And the Ukrainians have done this in their media, in their main newspapers. I've seen it. Oh, it's a legitimate act of war. It's a legitimate act of war. It's a very new line. Okay, let me ask you then in Kiev. So you carried out an act of war against whom precisely? Against Germany, because that's what you did. You admitting you carried out an act of war against Germany that has not attacked you, but is your ally and bankrolls you. So that would mean what you have done, maybe we have to requalify it. It's not actually just terrorism. It's an act of war of aggression because the Germans definitely didn't attack
a NATO
you.
Country.
Yes, exactly, which should actually trigger, literally should trigger NATO Article 5 against Ukraine. That's the reality. Look, let me add one footnote, because I've really been thinking about this a lot. The 7 Ukrainians who carried this out, I don't take this personally. I'm not an idiot. If a lawyer, right, in a trial in Germany had made the argument and said, this man is an officer of the Ukrainian armed forces. Yes, he was working undercover. That's not quite correct, but he's an officer of the Ukrainian armed forces. He was following orders. And from his perspective, He was striking against Russia.
Mhm.
I would be the first one to say, yeah, that's mitigating circumstances. It's still a crime, but I understand why this man is not the first one to be punished. I can
Yes.
see that. But to have this coming from the state that did it, that is ridiculous, because if it's an act of war, then they attack Germany, and then they
Yes.
have to admit that. And if it's just terrorism, it's not much better, is it now?
Mhm. Tarik, this is very complicated issue here in Germany. There are lots of heated debate around the Nord Stream. Do you expect in the future a change in the government in Germany which may put the interests of Germany on top of everything and pursue the prosecution of whoever is involved in the sabotage of the Nord Stream, which led to a rapid deindustrialization of Germany? We're talking about tens of thousands of
Helped in it,
workers
absolutely.
are losing their jobs nowadays in the
Yeah.
factories due to the bankruptcy of many of these, let's say,
Yeah.
the industrial zones and the plants in Germany itself.
Yeah.
Is there a chance for Germany, to put it bluntly, for a government to come and put the interests of the Germans, or with the presence of the American forces in Germany, that is going to be like a very difficult task for Germany?
Let me put it like this. During the Cold War, right, we have seen governments that were not independent of the US in West Germany, right? During the Cold War, we're talking about West Germany. That would be our comparison here. But we have seen governments that were better and, technically speaking, more aggressive at looking after German interests. That was perfectly possible during the Cold War. And it wasn't necessarily ideological. Many people will find this strange, but I would actually say this is true of Brandt, Willy Brandt, the most left-wing chancellor Germany ever had, and he should never have, retired or resigned. He made a mistake there. And I think it's also in some ways true of Helmut Kohl, one of the most conservative chancellors they've ever had. They all had limits. They all had limits. And the people that rule us now have no limits. It's total submission. That's so weird. The Cold War isn't on, and it's total submission. But what the example of the Cold War tells me, by analogy, I might be wrong, is that it's possible to at least fight for more respect from our NATO partners. And one of the things that I would hope for, I don't know if this can still happen, but I agree with you that what happened around Nord Stream on the German side, the others also concern us, but we can't clear up everything. But the German, that's our house. We could keep some order there. What happened about Nord Stream on the German side, we need parliamentary commissions to actually investigate this, and it will probably take many years, right? And we also very likely need judicial procedures to go after people. Let me put it like this. Having bad policy is not a crime, right? It's awful, but it's not a crime, and we can't criminalize it. So if somebody comes up with very stupid ideas about the green transition, right, and then damages the German economy, you vote them out of office, you get rid of them, but you don't put them in court, because that's a very bad route to take. But I give you a concrete example. If Chancellor Olaf Scholz knew about the plans to detonate Nord Stream, and if he didn't do anything, that is a crime. I won't even name it, but that's a crime. That's not just bad policy, that's a crime.
And
that's
what if he knew
crime.
the perpetrator? He didn't know about the attack, but then he knew who is behind the attack.
And if he helped with a cover-up or tolerated a cover-up, that is also criminal. Yes, all these things then fall under criminal paragraphs. They do. So there can very well be, let me put it like this, because I don't have proof, but it's very, very imaginable that there are criminally relevant aspects to what happened on the German side concerning Nord Stream. If people knew in advance, if people, God forbid, even helped in some way, and if people knew afterwards but helped the cover-up or even tolerated the cover-up, all of these things, I think there are criminal questions in play then. Yes. And to come back to your initial question, I want to see that. I want this to be dealt with. This is a terrible event in German history, and it must be addressed. Am I optimistic? Not very, to be honest. But hey, we can all be surprised.
Some Germans have harsh opinions about Olaf. Olaf ist ein Landesverräter, one of the...
well, look, if, I'm not saying this, but if somebody should be able to prove that he knew in advance, then the terminology of Landesverrat is not implausible. I'm sorry, I've looked it up. It's really, then it becomes very, very serious. If he knew in advance. Is that true? I really don't know. And I'm not claiming it.
Will not
anybody
know.
ever find out? I don't know. But if he knew, that would be a form of treason, yes.
I think we will never know if he knew about it, but probably we could know if he didn't act properly after he learned about the attack, and to protect the German interest. This is the window of probably of prosecuting the Merz and now, Olaf Scholz and now Merz as well. They're continuing on the same path. Tarik, the last part of our conversation, of course, this week we had lots of contradictory reports about Ukraine. First of all, we learned that Donald Trump urged Zelensky to accept Putin's terms or be destroyed by Russia, by the Financial Times. And then Trump said he's going to cancel or postpone the meeting in Hungary. He said, I don't want to waste, what did he say? I don't want to have a wasted meeting. A wasted meeting, he says. What has changed? What has happened in this marathonic meetings last week between European leaders? Zelensky flew to the States, to many European countries. He took some beautiful selfies on fighter jets, and everybody showed solidarity. And they said, we're going to continue this as long as it takes.
It's really unfair, The Swedes are going to give him Gripen fighter jets, and that's basically Saab. Saab, the cars. I've always wanted a Saab. He's getting the planes, I don't even get the car. What's going on? Anyhow, so look, here's the thing. I don't know what happened. I have a personal guess, and it's really just a guess. I have a guess that the meeting last Friday between Trump and Zelensky, 1 week ago exactly, really went very badly. I think that leak was correct in so far. I have a feeling that Trump is so chaotic that in that meeting, he didn't even understand the differences between we stop at the front line and you have to give the Russians all the remaining parts of the Donbass that they don't control yet.
Yes.
And he just got out of hand and started telling Zelensky, because that was the real deal breaker, right? He started telling him, you have to give up the rest of Donbass, right? Which is very, very important for the Ukrainians because it's basically a fortress, the rest of Donbass. Okay. And then they backpedaled, right? And we don't know why that happened. I at least don't know how and why that happened. I doubt that the Europeans have that much influence. I think it's much more likely that what happened was inside the White House, inside the Trump circle, broadly speaking, right? Somebody basically convinced Trump again, you went too far, you can't do this, we're giving up too much, you're going to look stupid, it's not going to work. Then he backpedaled and he started saying, now I want everybody to have a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire on the line of contact, right?
Yes.
And you know what is particularly important about this? He revised what was achieved in Alaska.
Yes.
Because in Alaska, the Russians had persuaded Trump to join them. The Russian position is we don't want a ceasefire because it's favoring the Ukrainians, which is true. We only want direct peace negotiations. And if we get a full peace, then it's peace, but no ceasefire in between. Now Trump is back, not only to before the meeting with Zelensky last Friday, he's back to before Alaska again. It's a U-turn inside a U-turn, right? And then, of course, he added the unprecedented sanctions against the two biggest Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. And there's a reason why Biden didn't dare touch them, right? He also most likely, even before probably, permitted the Ukrainians to use Storm Shadow missiles to shoot them deep into Russia, which wasn't the case before. The Americans had a handle on this. Maybe we should remind people. although the Storm Shadow are British missiles originally, because the Americans always argued there are American parts in them and you can't do what you want with them. And secondly, they need American satellite targeting data.
Yes.
So I think later then Trump denied this, but I think what really happened is that the Americans did give the permission to use these in a way that they haven't been used before, aggressively as not before against Russia. There is a set of technicalities around this, how this was handled through the Supreme Commander of NATO. Let's not go into that, but I think that's what happened. So you have the sanctions on the two biggest oil companies, you have that permission, and you also have like a real escalation in tone, because if you pay close attention to the sanctions announcement against Rosneft and Lukoil, those sanctions come from the Treasury, from Scott Besant's people, formerly.
Yes.
And the way Scott Bessant talked about this, I think on Fox News, was amazingly undiplomatic. He basically said Putin, is not honest enough, not straightforward. Here you go, bam. He blamed him personally, and he blamed Russia alone once again, right? It's all Russia and Putin's fault. Now, here's the interesting part. The Russians have reacted mostly in a very moderate way. Very moderate. I've seen Putin talk about this. They've remained very calm. This is actually very much their style. They haven't reacted to the insult stuff. They're just not going for it. They have made one thing clear. They have said this is a deterioration in the relationship with the US. There's costs to this. And they have also said one other important thing very clearly. If Trump reverses as well on the Tomahawk cruise missiles, and if Trump ends up giving the Tomahawk to Ukraine, to the Europeans, then our answer will be, it's hard for me to it's like it will be crushing. It's something like crushing. It's a very strong Russian word. It will be stunning, crushing. That's really the translation. And they didn't say where. And this is very typical, because Russia will not be boxed into this insane scenario where they would have to attack the West.
Yes.
Why would they do that? It's silly, right? That's what the Ukrainians want. So what I think it means is, if Trump makes that mistake on top of all the other mistakes he's just made, then the Russians would answer extremely violently inside Ukraine.
We will see if he will deliver these weapons to Ukraine. It will prolong. It will prolong the war. It will create more severe conditions on the eastern flank of the Ukrainian armed forces. It will create more tensions on other European in other European countries. It's just a recipe for more escalation, where this war has clearly showing patterns that Ukraine has to sit on a negotiation table and strike a deal with Russia. Something in me also, I don't know. This is not based on fact-based analysis, Tarik. It's just my gut feeling about the United States playing the good cop, the bad cop with the Europeans. Until this moment, I don't see. Every time we come close to an agreement, we see that this is extending and extending and extending. It seems that there are also forces behind Trump and behind this European elite who do not want for this war to be to come to an end now. So I don't know what are the calculations, but it's not in the interest of the people. This is what I want to say. This is not in your interest, not in my interest. Those not in the interest of the taxpayer citizen.
And I mentioned one calculation that I suspect is there. So they challenged Mark Rutte. Right, a journalist challenged him when he was in Washington, sitting next to Trump, NATO, and he said, what do you think about the fact that only 23% of Ukrainians in a Gallup poll, this is not a Russian poll, want to continue the war, and the others want negotiations? What do you think about that? And Rutte basically said, in so many words, I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. We go on. And then there was an interview in Poland with Leszek Miller, who's supposedly sort of a liberal and a social democrat. And he went public at essentially the same time and said, you know what the best thing is we can do for Ukraine? We can kick out all the young Ukrainian males that are hiding in Poland so that they can send them to the front.
Yes.
And these two things tell me that I think what some people want in Europe and in the US again is to use up even more Ukrainian lives.
Yes.
They may even know that Ukraine can't win. Maybe they're so crazy they don't understand that. But they may even understand that. But
Yes.
by now, their strategy may be, we know we cannot defeat Russia. That's not going to happen. That was plan A. Plan
Yes.
B is absorb Russian force as long as we can.
Yes.
Right? Because they are thinking, remember what the Europeans are constantly fantasizing about. They're fantasizing about war with Russia in a few years.
Yes.
The favorite date that they name now is 2030.
5 years.
There's no basis for this. But
No.
now look at it from their cynical perspective. So while we are arming ourselves here, we let the Ukrainians bleed because they will take more power away from Russia. Russia has to
Yes.
pay something, so to speak, for fighting with them. That is, I think, one calculus that is happening here. Ukraine has been attacked by Russia. This is true. And Russian troops kill Ukrainian troops. This is true. But that doesn't mean that the West has treated Ukraine normally. The West has betrayed Ukraine and used it as a proxy and used it up.
Yes.
And is still doing that.
And we will see if in 5 years Ukraine will have the demographic capacity to continue this fight against the Russians. The unfortunate thing is many people will face the bitter conditions in the near future where Ukraine will have a shortage of men, not only for fighting, but also for having family. And this is going to be a very huge problem in the near future that we will face it later. So let's see. Tarik, my dear friend, thank you so much for your great insights again, for coming today on Syriana Analysis. Guys, this is a weekly show we do every Friday at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. I think, if I'm not mistaken, next Friday or Saturday, let's see, we will change the time here in Germany on the 1st of November, I think. Yeah, that would be Saturday. So next week it's going to be in the usual time, no changes of time. Guys, if you found this discussion informative, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Syriana Analysis, and consider supporting this independent work on Patreon. You can see the link scrolling on the screen or the QR code on the edge of the screen. Until next time, stay informed, stay rational, and see the world as it is, not as they tell you it is. Thank you again, dear Tarik.
Thank you, Kevork. Thank you.